There was a video a few days ago. You may have seen it. It was about a cursor. Specifically, it was about what happens when your cursor slows down, when you hover over a price and stop moving, when the mouse just sits there for a second and a half, maybe 2 seconds while you think. The session replay software clocks that pause, logs it, feeds it into a hesitation score, and the price you see next time you visit, or sometimes the same visit, same page refreshed, shifts. The response to that video was interesting. A lot of people said, I don't shop on desktop anymore. I use my phone. Right. So this is about your phone. Here is the thing about mobile traffic. It passed desktop somewhere around 2017, depending on which dataset you use, and it has not looked back. Somewhere between 60 and 70% of e-commerce browsing now happens on a mobile device. The infrastructure, the session analytics, the behavioral scoring, the dynamic pricing engines, it did not stay on desktop. It followed the traffic. Of course it did. That is what infrastructure does. The question is what it looks like when it gets there. Because your phone does not have a cursor.
There is no mouse to slow down. The hesitation signal that desktop systems were built around, that specific vector, does not exist. So they found a different one. Your thumb. Not metaphorically, literally. The active surface area of your thumb contact on a glass screen is a measurable behavioral signal. And it has been measurable since roughly 2014, when the academic literature on mobile touch dynamics started getting absorbed by the commercial analytics industry. A decisive tap, someone who knows what they want, selects it, moves on, registers as a small, high-velocity contact point. Compact, fast. The session script logs it as low hesitation. When you are not sure, something changes physiologically. The thumb settles differently. The contact boundary expands. The duration of the press extends. The pressure signature flattens across a larger area of the screen. You are, in a measurable sense, broadcasting your indecision through the glass before you have consciously finished making it.
Companies like AppsFlyer, Adjust, and Branch.io, these are SDK providers, which means they make the code kits that app developers drop into their retail applications, the plumbing that sits inside most major shopping apps on your phone right now. They had been processing touch telemetry at this granularity for years. The stated purpose is fraud detection and user authentication. The behavioral biometrics field, which is the formal name for this, was built around identifying you, not as a bot. Your particular way of swiping, your tap pressure profile, your scroll velocity, unique enough to serve as a soft authentication layer. The same data, same SDK, same signal pipeline. The label on the use case is different. That is the only thing that changed. Now, the touch hesitation signal on its own is already an input into pricing logic at the platforms that license behavioral analytics. But the more interesting development, the one that moved this from plausible mechanism to documented commercial practice, is what happens when you combine that signal with something else your phone is broadcasting constantly, without you doing anything: your battery level. The FTC's 2025 report on surveillance pricing, which we referenced in the cursor video, contains a section that extends the core findings explicitly to mobile environments. The report documents that pricing intermediaries, companies that sit between manufacturers and retail platforms and sell dynamic pricing services, are ingesting device-level signals as inputs into their models. Battery status is among the documented signals. The logic is not complicated once you see it. If your battery is low, your time on the current session is finite. You know it, the algorithm knows it because your phone's battery API broadcasts it. There is no privacy protection on battery level. That was actually litigated, oddly, as a potential fingerprinting vector for a different reason entirely, and the outcome was inconclusive. Data flows. Below a certain threshold, and the internal documentation that is surfaced through FTC discovery and academic research points to the sub 15% range as a commonly flagged state, your behavioral profile changes in a documented way. You make faster decisions. You tolerate more friction. You are less likely to open a second browser tab to compare prices. The algorithmic inference is not that you are in a hurry, it is that your optionality has collapsed. You are, in commercial terms, a captured buyer at that moment. Captured buyers pay more. That is not a moral statement, it is a pricing strategy with a name. It is called demand inelasticity exploitation, and it is the same logic that prices airport water bottles at $4 and in-stadium beer at $17. The difference is that the airport knows you are in the airport. The app knows you are at 11% battery in a situation where you need this item in the next 20 minutes and your phone is about to die. It knows this because you told it. Not in words, in telemetry. Cross-referencing is where it becomes something different from ordinary dynamic pricing. Individual signals, hesitation, battery, location, time of day, previous session behavior, device model, which correlates to income bracket in the demographic models, connection type, whether you're on Wi-Fi or mobile data,
None of these alone is the price-setting input. Engine ingests the combination, weights them against each other.
Generates a confidence score for your willingness to pay above baseline, and the checkout price reflects that score. This is the part that is hard to internalize because it sounds like science fiction, but is documented commercial infrastructure. The Groundwork Collaborative, a Washington based economic research organization, published analysis in 2024 and into 2025, tracking the spread of dynamic pricing from travel and hospitality into general retail, specifically through mobile channels. Their finding was not that individual retailers invented this. It was that a relatively small number of pricing intermediaries, firms that sell dynamic pricing as a service, had built the infrastructure and were licensing it across thousands of retail clients simultaneously. The retailers do not necessarily know exactly what signals are being used. They contracted for the outcome, margin optimization. The intermediary handles the mechanism. This is structurally identical to how the surveillance pricing network works in the cursor video. The retailer does not run the session replay software. A vendor does. The retailer does not build the mobile behavioral scoring model. A vendor does. The vendor sells the service to enough clients that the infrastructure investment amortizes cleanly, and the individual retailer gets higher margin without having to think too hard about how. The legislative gap here is worth naming specifically because it is not an oversight. There is no current federal law in the United States that prohibits the use of device state signals, battery levels, signal strength, storage capacity as inputs into consumer pricing models. The FTC has issued guidance, several states have introduced bills. The American Privacy Rights Act, which had its most significant movement in 2024, contains provisions on behavioral data use that consumer advocates argued should explicitly cover pricing applications. The final version, to the extent there is a final version, and that is genuinely complicated to track, does not clearly prohibit this specific use case. The argument from the industry side, when pressed, is consistent. The signals are anonymized. They are used in aggregate. No individual consumer is being targeted by name. The system is responding to behavioral patterns, not to you specifically. The counterargument, which several FTC commissioners have made on record, is that a system that treats your hesitation, your battery level, your device model, your location, your previous purchase history, and your current session behavior as a unified pricing input, and that adjusts your checkout price accordingly, is targeting you with quite a lot of specificity, regardless of whether your name is attached to the record. There is a detail in the behavioral biometrics literature that keeps surfacing when you go deep enough into the academic side of this. The touch pressure dynamics that signal hesitation, the expanded contact area, the extended press duration, these are not uniform across user populations. They correlate with age, they correlate with neurological factors, they correlate with anxiety levels in ways that researchers have been documenting since at least 2019 in contexts like mental health app monitoring and accessibility research. The same signature that flags a calm user as hesitant can flag an anxious user as hesitant at a much lower actual decision threshold. The model does not distinguish. It reads the signal, it assigns the hesitation score, it adjusts the price. Nobody built this to extract money from anxious people. That is not how these systems get designed. But the outcome, a pricing model that is measurably more aggressive toward users whose touch signatures correlate with elevated anxiety states, is not a hypothetical. It is what the mechanism produces. The mobile checkout experience was sold as frictionless, one-tap, biometric authentication so seamless you barely notice it happened. Stored payment details, so the gap between wanting something and owning it is measured in seconds. The frictionlessness was not designed for your convenience, exactly. Friction is what gives you time to reconsider. Friction is what makes you open a second tab. Friction is what makes you notice the price changed from the last time you looked. A frictionless checkout is also a checkout you cannot slow down enough to interrogate. Your cursor used to be the thing that gave you away. You could theoretically control it, move faster, move with more certainty. It would not have helped much. The session replay software captures the whole session, not just the moment of hesitation. But the idea of control was there. Your battery percentage is not something you perform. It is what it is. 11% is 11%. The algorithm already knows what that means about the next 4 minutes of your shopping session before you do. The cursor video ended with a question that a lot of people apparently found uncomfortable, whether the price you see is the price or whether it is a price that was calculated specifically for you in that moment. On mobile, the calculation has more inputs. The answer is the same.